Welcome once again to Lehto's Law. Here's Steve Lehto.
Been a lot of hubbub lately about the tuna sandwiches from Subway. And I've actually done videos about this already. The question is, what is in a tuna sandwich from Subway? Is it tuna? Is it not tuna? And I'm a lawyer, so we'll talk about what legally you can expect when you buy a tuna sandwich from Subway. I always get the chicken teriyaki myself. I've never had a tuna sandwich from Subway, so I can't speak from personal experience as to whether or not it tastes like tuna. But that, of course, is the big question. I did a video about this already, but today we're going to talk more about the legal aspects of it. So CNET.com has the most recent coverage. Subway tuna sandwich DNA results, the controversy explained. So they were talking about the DNA, the CSI version of the Subway sandwich from Subway. A New York Times report about the sandwich chain's tuna sandwiches has raised eyebrows. And so here's what's going on. Subway has been fielding a lot of questions about just how much tuna is actually in its tuna sandwiches. And the question is there any tuna? Because a lawsuit was filed that originally claimed that there was no tuna, zero tuna in a tuna sandwich. Subway, of course, says, no, that's not true. It is tuna. And so the plaintiffs in this case, apparently did some DNA testing, and they said it came back as having zero DNA from tuna. So some other news organizations have now done their own DNA testing and gotten some strange results. The New York Times says that their testing showed there could be very little tuna. And they said that they tested a bit of tuna to find this out. This all, of course, started in January when the Washington Post reported on a lawsuit against Subway. They claimed that whatever was in the sandwich was actually made from anything but tuna. So they were saying there is zero tuna, no tuna in a tuna sandwich. That's what the lawsuit was saying. That's how this all got started. So you may recall Subway's had other issues with their food. At one point in time, they were debating what a foot-long sandwich is. How long would a foot long be? Is that an obvious answer? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. So a commercial food testing lab analyzed more than 60 inches of Subway, which some might guess would be 5 feet, but you never know. And they tested 60 inches of Subway sandwiches from 3 different Subway locations in Los Angeles, because several people said, what if one of the franchise operators had simply gone rogue and was mixing in something else? It's possible, right? I suppose it's possible. So by testing 3 different Subway locations, presumably they can kind of start ruling some of that out. And they found in their tests that there was no amplifiable tuna DNA present in the sample. Amplifiable tuna DNA. I'm assuming they're running this through a Marshall stack. No, an amplifiable tuna DNA. I assume that means they take a very small sample and try to extrapolate from it. The lab said this could mean one of 2 things, though. This could mean either there's no tuna, or it's tuna that's been processed to the point where it can't be identified. And so they've said it could be either one. Either no tuna or processed tuna that we can't ID. So at that point, they're not saying there's no tuna. They're just saying there was no tuna DNA that they could identify. And the question is, are you entitled to tuna, or are you entitled to identifiable tuna DNA when you buy a tuna sandwich? And I'm sure you know the obvious answer there, and that is that they're not promising you that you can take the stuff to a CSI crime lab and have it identified in slow motion with cool music being played in the background, okay? The question is, did it start out as tuna? And legally, by the way, that is what we're getting at, so we'll get there in a second. The report noted that this isn't the only DNA test that's been done. Inside Edition also tested tuna samples in a lab, and they found tuna that was present in their samples. So Inside Edition said, yes, we found tuna. The other people said, no, we didn't, but we're not exactly sure what it means. And then, of course, the plaintiffs at the beginning said, we found none. So Subway says, the fact is we serve 100% wild-caught cooked tuna, which is mixed with mayonnaise and used in freshly made sandwiches, wraps, and salads that are served to and enjoyed by our guests. That is a statement from Subway. They also noted that the plaintiffs in the original lawsuit have backed off their own claims Even the plaintiffs have softened their original claims. In a new filing in June, their complaints centered not on whether Subway's tuna was tuna at all, but whether it was 100% sustainably caught skipjack and yellowfin tuna. So that's the question. Have the plaintiffs pivoted there a little bit? And are they now saying that, well, it might be tuna, it just might not be the kind of tuna that we are promised? In addition, the company took issue with the idea of DNA testing. DNA testing is simply not a reliable way to identify denatured proteins like Subway's tuna, which was cooked before it was tested. You know, all this talk of denatured proteins and amplifiable DNA is getting me hungry. And not surprisingly, this, of course, has become a social media firestorm. Somebody tweeted, half my text messages right now are about the New York City mayor's race. The other half are friends trying to figure out what they're eating when they ordered tuna from Subway. So, believe it or not, this all boils down to warranty law. Warranty law. And I specialize in lemon law, which derives from warranty law. And so warranties, generally speaking, in America come from a thing called the Uniform Commercial Code. It's been adopted by all 50 states. And there are things called warranties defined there. So in the UCC, it says, here are the kinds of warranties there are. Here's when they arise. Here's when they don't arise. Here's what happens when you breach them, and so on. And so there's two warranties that come into play here. And one is the express warranty, and one is the implied warranty of merchantability. So these are very, very simple concepts. When you read the definitions from the UCC, they might sound a little bit less than simple, but they actually are pretty simple. So, for instance, the creation of an express warranty. What is an express warranty, right? So, an express warranty by the seller is created as follows. And this is MCL 440.2313. Okay? That's the Michigan version, but it's verbatim in most states this way. An express warranty is created by an affirmation of fact or promise made by the seller to the buyer, which relates to the goods, and becomes part of the basis of the bargain, which creates an express warranty. The goods shall conform to the affirmation or promise. So when I put a sign on the wall and says, I sell tuna sandwiches, and you say, I'd like to buy a tuna sandwich. I go, I'd like to sell you a tuna sandwich. You hand me money, I hand you a sandwich. The fact that I described it as being a tuna sandwich could be presumed to be an affirmation of fact or promise. I promised you a tuna sandwich. Might never promise you a rose garden, but I promised you a tuna sandwich. You better get a tuna sandwich. That's an express warranty. However, there's a more specific one. An express warranty can be created as a description of the goods, which is made part of the basis of the bargain, creates an express warranty. The goods shall conform to the description. Now, for these purposes, food is goods. Goods, okay? So when we talk about food, we're talking about goods. A description of the goods, they must conform to the description. So if I tell you, I sell tuna sandwiches, you'd like to buy a tuna sandwich? I'd like to sell you a tuna sandwich. I'm describing it as a tuna sandwich. A tuna sandwich presumably means it contains tuna. Now, the question is, what is meant by tuna? Well, I think most people recognize it as a fish known as a tuna. And so if I tell you I'm selling you a tuna sandwich, presumably there's going to be something in the sandwich that came from the tuna. And I understand some of this is so basic, you want to like fast forward, right? But it's important to understand. There's a difference between it originating from a tuna compared to it being identifiable through DNA as tuna. And there is a distinction there. Because as several of these people who did the processing pointed out, that if you take meat and process it, which it's obviously going to get processed, you take the meat and process it, it might get processed to the point where it cannot be DNA tested. The question simply is it tuna? And that's going to be easy enough for Subway to prove. And I mentioned this in a previous video. If you're defending this case for Subway, all you do is find your receipts, which you'll have, showing how much tuna you bought. Then find your paperwork that shows where the tuna went, who you shipped it to, all the franchises that got the tuna, there'll be paperwork for all of this. And obviously, you don't buy tons of tuna and ship it to thousands of stores and not use it. So it's going to be pretty simple to prove that you did indeed buy the tuna and ship the tuna. And so the promise or the description of the goods that it is tuna doesn't matter if it can be DNA identified as tuna or not. The question is it tuna? That's a yes or no question. And the answer is, if they can show they bought a bunch of tuna and shipped it to the stores, and the people at the stores will say, yeah, we bought the tuna, here's how we paid for it, here's the receipts. There's a huge paper trail on all of this. And they're going to be able to say, we can prove that this is tuna that we used. And presumably, you could probably follow the tuna through the supply chain if you wanted to. And DNA tests at different points to identify at what point it becomes what it becomes. But the fact is, it's still tuna. It just doesn't contain amplifiable DNA. So the other thing that's important to remember is that, and this is straight from the UCC, it is not necessary to the creation of an express warranty that the seller use formal words such as warrant or guarantee. So I've had people say, well, Steve, come on. There's a thing on the wall that says a tuna sandwich. Is that a warranty? Doesn't say warranty. Doesn't have to. Doesn't have to. And by the way, one other thing that's very important to understand here is that food is also covered by an implied warranty of merchantability. And the implied warranty of merchantability is what I told you before about how if you buy a product, and everyone knows what it does. A refrigerator keeps your food cold. A lawnmower will mow your lawn. The seller doesn't need to tell you, by the way, this lawnmower will cut your grass. And when you take it home and it doesn't, I never told you it'd cut your grass. That's what lawnmowers do. So food, by definition, is a sale under the UCC and is covered by the warranty of merchantability. So that's 440.2314. A warranty of the goods shall be merchantable is implied in a contract for the sale. And by the way, this is a contract because you walk in and say, I'd like to buy that sandwich. I say, I'd like to sell you that sandwich. Money and goods exchange. Boom, contract. A warranty of the goods shall be merchantable is implied in a contract for the sale if the seller is a merchant with respect to goods of that kind. So if you go into a restaurant and buy food from a restaurant, that's what restaurants do is they make and sell food. They are a merchant with respect to goods of that kind. There is an implied warranty that food is safe. Under this section, the serving for value of food or drink to be consumed either on the premises or elsewhere is a sale. And then goods to be merchantable must be at least, and there's like 5 or 6 descriptions, one of which is they are fit for the ordinary purposes for which such goods are used. It's food, you can eat it, it won't harm you, it's healthy, it's good for you. It's not necessarily healthy in the sense of health food, but I'm saying you eat it and it does what food is supposed to do, okay? I've told you stories before about bad situations in restaurants. We won't go there right now. But yes, if you got food poisoning at a restaurant, they have breached the implied warranty of merchantability. Okay? Whether you want to pursue it or not, it's another story altogether. But the point is the law is on the books. There you go. You should also know, however, that for goods to be merchantable, they must conform to the promises or affirmations of fact made on the container or label, if any. I don't believe tuna sandwiches bear their own labels at Subway. But an argument can be made that if you go into a restaurant and they serve you food in a container, and the container describes the food, which happens from time to time, it's got to conform to that description to meet the implied warranty of merchantability. So, again, there's 2 warranties at play here. The express warranty, and that is, this is tuna. Is it tuna? If it's tuna, great. If it's not tuna, 0 tuna, then they'd have a problem because they've breached the express warranty. And then the implied warranty of merchantability is that the product is fit for the ordinary purposes for which such goods are used, food, yet eat it, okay? And so in this case, it's got to be something that you can ingest. It won't harm you, and presumably it's got some kind of food value. So I don't mean a good purchase. I mean, your body recognizes it as food, okay? I'm purposely trying to keep the standards here really low because we are talking about fast food, okay? So, that's how it is. So getting back to the original concept, the original allegation was that the Subway sandwiches contained no tuna, but they came to the conclusion after doing DNA testing. Several news organizations have now done their own DNA testing with mixed results. Some found some traces of tuna, some found not much, and some found what could be interpreted as simply heavily modified processed tuna. And in that case, it's still tuna. And no one promised you that you'd have tuna that was identifiable through DNA testing. Who does that? Other than news organizations and plaintiffs' lawyers. So there you go. So I can't weigh in on this. I've never eaten a Subway tuna sandwich, number one. And number two, I don't know. We'll have to let it play out in the courts and in the in the media. But if I was defending this, what I would do, because I right now, Subway, they're getting some attention from this. I'm not sure if it's all good. If I was Subway, I would very, very quickly dive into getting the documentation and the evidence and rounding up the numbers. How much tuna does Subway buy a year? How many different companies do they buy tuna from? Where does the tuna come from? And I'd hold a press conference, and I'd actually say, look, right here, this is how much tuna we buy each year. Look right here. These are all the companies that we buy the tuna from. And I'd go through the whole process to show that now, we actually buy so much tuna. If we weren't putting it in sandwiches, where's it going? And that'd be a problem. So there you go. That's a Subway tuna sandwich, DNA results and the controversy from CNET.com. Aaron Carson wrote the story. And I hope the warranty issues help you a little bit there. It was sent to me by a whole lot of people, including, I can get all these people down, George, David, Dan, Dale, Mark, Keith, James, Doshan, Norman, Josh, Ralph, Duncan, Michael, David, JD, Jason, another David, Lon, Craig, and Steve, not me, all sent it to me. Thanks a lot. Questions or comments, put them below this. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching Lehto's Law. Even if happiness forgets you a little bit, never completely forget about it.